Hi, and welcome to How Do IBI, a multi-part screencast series on using SQL Server analysis services based on my book Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server 2008. I'm Lynn Langett, Developer Evangelist with Microsoft in Southern California. And in this installment, we're going to talk about integrating SQL Server analysis services data mining into Excel 2007. Before we go to the screencast, there are some FAQs and gotchas to address. The first of these is we are going to be taking a look at the use of the data mining ribbon, which integrates into Excel 2007. In order to use that, you need to download the add-ins, which are available from several locations, but probably the easiest place to find them is www.sqlserverdataMining.com, and configure the connection to an analysis server instance. In a previous screencast, I took a look at the functionality of the other ribbon, which is added, the table analysis ribbon. So if you're interested in that, you might want to take a look at that screencast. I'm going to go through all the sections of the data mining ribbon in this screencast, including the trace capability, which is really powerful and kind of a hidden jewel. I want to make sure that you all see that. There are some gotchas. First, as I mentioned, is this is dependent on an active connection to an SSAS instance. You must set the appropriate permissions so that the users can do the actions that you need them to be able to do through Excel. And when you're setting the initial configuration, you need to determine whether or not you're going to want these users to be able to create temporary models in Excel or to create permanent models on your analysis services instance. As I mentioned in the table analysis screencast that I did previously, we are currently testing analysis in the cloud, and you will see that in my instance of Excel, and that is a separate add-in that you get from the same URL that I mentioned. You just go to /cloud. And now let's go ahead and go to the screencast and take a look at this functionality. Screencast, we're going to look at using Excel 2007 to interface with SSAS data mining. As I mentioned in the introduction, in order to work with data mining in Excel, you'll need to download the free add-ins and install them. Something to be aware of is that this works with Excel 2007 or greater only. What I've done after installing and configuring the add-ins using the wizard that's included is I've opened the sample workbook that is set up to showcase the functionality of the data mining ribbon. That's called dm-addins_sample-data.xlsx. So this workbook is set up in several different worksheet pages, and the pages contain data that is in a format that is conducive to working with the included functionality. So you can see as you go through here, we've got table, tools, analysis, sample, forecasting, fill from example, and these are also referenced on this first page. So I'm not going to take the time in the screencast to go through all of these examples, but I do encourage in your learning that you do take the time when you download and work with this, because it'll really help you to understand not only what's available from within Excel, also it'll deepen your understanding of what the data mining algorithms themselves do. So I'm going to click on the Table Analysis Tools Sample Workbook page to get started. And notice that the data mining ribbon capability is not made available until I click inside of the table. So once I click inside of the table, I see the data mining ribbon, and I can click on it to see the various sections. Also note that I have a context-sensitive table tools set of ribbons. I have the Analyze ribbon, and then because I've installed a separate add-in, I have the Analyze in the Cloud ribbon. We're not going to cover those two in this screencast. They were covered in the previous one. So if you're interested in that functionality, go ahead and grab that one and listen to that. So we're going to click on the data mining ribbon. And first, I'm going to give you a general overview of the sections, and then we'll drill into the functionality that's encapsulated in the sections. So the sections roughly follow the CRISP data mining software development lifecycle status, and this tool is really designed for a professional data miner as an alternative to using the Business Intelligence Development Studio interface. So it's a very, very powerful tool, and it's reflective of sort of a general direction that we're taking in pushing deeper functionality into what had been traditionally end user or client tools for users that were not as sophisticated in terms of analysis. So you can see the sections generally are data preparation, data modeling, accuracy and validation, model usage, management, connection, and help. And as with the use of the table analysis ribbon, using the data mining ribbon requires an active connection to analysis services. And I'll demonstrate that by attempting to use one of the pieces of functionality, and you'll see the error that's thrown. So if I click on Income and I then click on Classify, it will return an error showing me that there's no connection to any analysis services instance. So then it tells me what to do, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to click in the connection section under no connection, and that'll open up the analysis services connection dialog box, and then I'll click new. I'll just put in a dot to indicate localhost. I'll use Windows authentication, select the sample catalog name of AdventureWorks DW, and then I'll test the connection to make sure that it's working, and it is working, and I'll click OK, and I'll click close, and now we have one active connection and we can proceed. Now, unlike the table analysis ribbon, the data mining ribbon is designed not only to work with Excel data, but also to work with your existing models on Analysis Server. And to demonstrate that, before I go into modeling and working with the data that we see in front of us on this Excel workbook page, I'm actually going to start with the model usage and the model management tabs so that you can understand how this truly is an alternative interface to data mining that's being hosted in analysis services. So if I click under model usage under browse, what will open is a browse window, and then I will be shown all of the various data mining structures and their associated models. So for example, we've done a lot of work in this series with targeted mailing, and if I select the decision trees mining model, you can see that I now can have metadata displayed about that in terms of the input, the output, so on and so forth. And then when I click next, I'm actually presented with the same browser that we are familiar with from working with bids. So I've got actually both browsers that are associated with dependency with this particular algorithm. I have the decision trees viewer, and I have the dependency network viewer that I had shown in a previous screencast. If you've not seen that, the way that this works is you select the attribute of interest by clicking on it, and then you can adjust the view showing the attributes that are most closely related by just dragging the slider down towards the strongest links, and you can then just very easily see the output of this particular algorithm. Now, one thing that's very interesting about the implementation inside of Excel is we do have this copy to Excel button, and I really encourage you to experiment with this because how it functions varies, depends on the browser. And I'll give you an example here. If I click on copy to Excel, what will happen once this renders, I'm going to go ahead and close this browse tool, is I literally get a picture. So in some cases I get a snapshot or just a photo, if you will, or an image, if you will, of the particular browser. But in other cases I'll actually get a manipulatable set of data. So I'll be demonstrating that as we move forward working with some of the other capabilities. So one of the considerations with the data mining ribbon is whether the user is going to work with existing models, whether browsing them, documenting them, querying them, or managing them. And I'll give you an example of what a user could do in management by opening that dialog box. Manage mining structures and models. It's really quite powerful. For example, in our same targeted mailing scenario, the authorized user in Excel could rename, delete, clear, process, export, and import the metadata for the model. So it's really an administrative interface, if you will. In terms of querying the model, again, there's quite a bit of documentation on each page of these dialog boxes, and although it's not super common for people to read that, it is quite helpful. So we'll select the model here, and if we wanted to click the advanced button, then we would be presented with a rather sophisticated DMX query window. It's kind of, again, one of those hidden gems. So this was in the query section of the model usage, and then selecting the model and clicking the advanced button. And here is the framework for a syntax query. And in a lot of ways, I find this environment to be more friendly than writing queries inside of the BIDS environment and even SSMS. So you can see inside of here that we have a number of templates included around prediction and management as well. We can also add input, and we get a dialog box to do that if we want to work on that. We can map columns, add output, and if we select inside of our query, we're again presented with the friendly interface dialog box, add output, and we simply click through here to model our query. So particularly for those of you who are new to DMX, which I would assume would be most of the audience, I know I personally have found this to be a great productivity enhancer, just querying existing mining models. So in addition to working with existing models, another great piece of functionality in here is the trace capability. And as I mentioned in the introduction, this is like a mini SQL Server profiler in that it will return information about activity that is occurring. So I'm going to turn it on so as we generate some activity, we can then go back to the trace and we can take a look and see what output has been produced. So in working with the core functionality of doing new mining activities, there are three sections of the data mining ribbon. The first is data preparation, where you can explore data, clean, and sample data. So if I click on the income column here, I'm going to just go ahead and close the trace, and then click on explore data. It explains what it does, and then we select a range, either from the selected table or a data range, and then we select a column, and then it really just shows us a representation of the values in that column, and it creates discretized or bucketed groups of that data. And we can just, with a click of a button, add this to our workbook page. Again, there's a whole bunch of wonderful productivity enhancers in here, things that you may have done manually or via SQL scripts using SQL data, and I really encourage you to take a look at all of this in great detail. So this section has to do with data preparation, exploring, cleaning, and sampling the data. The next section of the ribbon has to do with applying an algorithm to the data. So I'm going to, with income selected, click on the cluster functionality here. And again, it explains pretty thoroughly what it's doing. And I have the ability to select from this table a data range, or interestingly, an external data source. And again, this bears a little bit of explanation. Where might this data source live? The data source actually lives on analysis services. It's a little bit confusing because we're working inside of Excel, but you can see if I click on this, these are the data sources that I've defined, that I've created on analysis services. And you might be reminded that data sources can be created against any source for which there's a provider. So this isn't necessarily just SQL Server data. It could be Oracle data, other types of relational data. So using the capability from Excel to then retrieve data out of any place that you can connect. So I'm going to just use Excel for the purposes of our example. And I'll click on cluster and next and next. And what is happening here is we are using the power of SQL Server data mining, but without the complexity of the interface that we were presented with in BIDS. You may remember when you create a data mining model, the first choice that you have to make after you select the data source is which algorithm you want to use. And this is really a great alternative way for users that maybe are not as familiar with core data mining concepts. So in terms of clustering, what we're doing here is the number of table columns for grouping rows together, and then here we're selecting the inputs. So let's say we're not interested in gender, for example. If we want to configure the advanced parameters, we could do that. And this you might recognize from working with BIDS or looking at previous screencasts are the advanced parameters. So it's truly an alternative interface to working with BIDS. And then we'll click next, and here's the test set holdout capability in the next page of the wizard. And notice it's just a 3-click to create this mining model. And notice it's creating a structure, table 2 structure, with the model name of clustering. And it's using the Microsoft clustering algorithm. We have the options to browse the model and enable drill through if we wish. And if we've enabled it, we can create a temporary model rather than, and that's only in the Excel session, rather than creating a permanent model. And I actually don't remember in my configuration here if I've enabled temporary model creation. So if I didn't, we'll get an error, and if I did, the model will create. So I'll click Finish to create this model, and we'll see what result we get as this is rendering. Again, so you understand what's happening here, it's going out to analysis services, feeding it the data from Excel, and creating a temporary, so a session mining model, and then displaying the results inside of Excel using the browsers that are included. So you could then just work with these browsers and manipulate these browsers in ways that are familiar and comfortable, looking at the cluster characteristics. Again, a great piece of functionality, a hidden gem, is the fact that while working in Excel, you have the ability to copy this information to Excel. And as I showed you previously, sometimes that just makes a snapshot. However, in the case of the cluster profiles, it's kind of interesting what it does. And I've just clicked copy to Excel, and it has to do a little bit of work in the background, and I'll close this out. And what's actually happened is, using the rich formatting in Excel, with just one click, we have actionable information that we can then further manipulate using all the filtering and data tools inside of Excel. And this has been some functionality that customers are really super excited about, because it is so usable and so accessible. So to complete our tour of the data modeling section, basically this is an alternative interface to create data mining structures and models. If you click on Advanced, you actually get access to all the additional algorithms. The accuracy and validation section allows you to work with lift and profit charts, which allow you to validate the effectiveness of the results of your data mining model. And those can be shown as classification matrices through cross-validation or lift or profit charts. Now I'm going to go ahead and open the trace functionality. I had turned this on earlier. And again, I think this is really a terrific tool for learning, because what you can do as you've turned this on is you can then review all of the XMLA and the DMX that is created as you're actioning through this ribbon. And again, I have found this to be a great productivity tool for myself and for developers who were getting started here. So here we can see the DMX where we're creating the temporary mining model that we just ran through the wizard. So lots of rich functionality inside of the data mining ribbon. I found it to be a tremendous tool for developers who are learning in terms of the data mining world. Also a great tool for analysts who would not have access to Business Intelligence Development Studio, but who need very, very deep analytical capabilities. And the last consideration I want all of my developer audience to think about is that you can extend Excel using Visual Studio tools for Office. So you can think of this as a starting point for your particular business implementation. And you could extend and customize this interface so that your analysts could take it even further.